Hello, everyone. Welcome to this podcast with myself, Suzy Beaumont, personal development consultant and founder of Change Your World, and Kamalyn Kaur, mindset coach and psychotherapist and a founder of Key Therapies. We have been doing this on a weekly basis now, and that's because we've both been invited on to do a feature on BBC Radio Scotland called The Winter Wellness. We're on the Kate Adams show, the morning show, every Monday around about 11 o'clock. And we've had this kind of 10-minute, 15-minute slot to talk about everything happiness, health, and well-being. But the subjects that we're talking about, they're so complex, and we just can't cover them in 10 minutes. So we thought we would do these additional podcasts and these conversations just to kind of help our viewers, our audience, get some top tips and tools and techniques that they can apply, some self-care, healthy habits, improve their relationships, just your general well-being. And today we're talking about healthy habits, and the reason why, so on Monday we were invited on to talk about the fact that motivation, if you've set any New Year's resolutions, usually by the third week in January, motivation has gone out the window, your healthy habits have fallen by the wayside, and you've fallen off the wagon, and you probably feeling like a failure, all this negative self-chat, you're just frustrated. So we're here today to unpick that, give you some tools and techniques that you can take away to maintain your healthy habits, but also what might be some of the things that derail you in the first place. So welcome, Cam. Lovely to have you here again.
Thanks so much.
The lovely Camtastic as I call her. So,
what a title to live up to.
I know, no pressure, right? So we were, as I say, we're talking habits, motivation. So why do you think it is that we seem to see this common pattern where people start with gusto in the new year? They're like, oh, new year, new me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to make all these changes. And then by, if you're lucky, week 3, sometimes it's week 1 has gone out the window, week 2 is out the window. But if you do last to week 3, why are we seeing these habits falling down?
Okay, so there's a number of reasons. The first one is probably something that a lot of people have heard of already, which is it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. And it is true, because it does take 21 days for a neural pathway to begin to be developed. And a neural pathway is basically instruction that your brain sends to your body, and it repeats the same pattern again and again until that behavior then becomes a habit. So what will happen is it takes about 21 days for that neural pathway to begin to be formed. But by that point, what the brain usually does is it starts to trick you into going back the way and saying, this seems like far too much hard work, can't be bothered with this, don't have the energy for this, it's too dark, it's too cold. So the brain tries to trick you to go back the way, because remember, your brain's dealing with a lot all of the time, right? Even when you're sleeping, it's processing and it's dreaming. During the day, you've got all the things that you need to do just to keep yourself alive. So any change is just extra energy that the brain is having to use, so it really doesn't like it. So the first week, everybody has that wind of energy and that gusto, right? By the second week, you start to feel as though it's a bit of an effort. And the third week, that's the week that if you can persevere past, I'm not going to say it gets significantly easier, but if you can persevere past the third week, the chances of you sticking to the goals are probably going to be a lot higher than if you didn't stick to the 3 weeks. But that 3-week period, because that's where the brain starts to kick in, that's usually when people go, nah, can't bother doing this and I'm not interested. Yeah. So that's the neurological reason. The other reasons are, it could be that your goals are maybe unrealistic in the first place. Maybe what you're trying to achieve is too big, or the timescales in which you're trying to achieve it isn't realistic, or maybe what you're trying to do isn't realistic for that period in your time, in your life, or at that point in time. So if you've got lots of things going on, maybe what you're trying to achieve isn't achievable, not forever, but during that period of time. So unrealistic expectations, The second thing is setting goals that don't really belong to you. So you want to lose weight because your partner's losing weight. You want to be active because everybody else in the house is going active. You want to find a person because you're single, because everybody else is telling you to find somebody. So the goals might not belong to you, which is why your attachment isn't there in the first place. So if you're not attached to something, it's easier to walk away from it, and it begins to feel like an effort as well. So I would say that's the second reason. And then the third reason could be, and this is one of the things I'd highlighted in the Kay Adams show as well, there needs to be an emotional attachment, Suzy, to whatever you're achieving. There needs to be a deeper rooted value to why you're doing what you're doing. So say, for example, you want to get fitter. It can't just be, I want to get fitter because I want to look good. You want to get fitter and you want to look good. Why? Right? So you always have to explore the why. So once you explore that, your answer might be because it makes me feel good about myself. And then why is that important to you? Because it makes me feel confident. And then why is that important to you? Because then it means that I'm more able to step out my comfort zone and grab opportunities, which means I'm reaching my full potential. So do you see where now when you're why, and you're breaking it down, now it's not just about getting fitter. Now it's about that fitness is dependent on my potential, but also on my health and my well-being as well. So there's more reason to stick to that goal as opposed to a superficial reason, which is I just want to look good and I want to just look like a certain way.
Yeah, you just want to aspire and compare yourself to what we see on social media.
Yeah.
That the emotional why, there's a technique called 7 levels deep. I think there's an app you can get, and it's actually going through asking, well, why do you want that? Or why do you want that? Why is that important to you? And you do it 7 times, because you really get, by the time you've gone 7 levels deep, you've really either got to the emotional why of why it's really important to you, or you've completely unraveled it and realized actually
it's not important.
It's not important, or I'm doing this for all the kind of wrong reasons. So highly recommend that. What you were saying there, I want to talk about the trickster, and because I do think the psychology of this is really fascinating, where with the stories we tell ourselves, maybe fear of success, fear of failure. I know a lot of people are probably thinking, what do you mean fear of success? But when we do have successes in our life, that can bring all kinds of attention that we might not be ready for or don't know how to handle. So, you know, success on a financial aspect, I suppose, if you've got a successful business, can bring in money, which, people can react really negatively to. And you kind of, and depending on your relationship with money, you might react very negatively. You might think, oh yeah, I want this, I want that. But actually, when you get it, you're like, oh, I don't like this, there's that people looking at me going, oh, who does they think they are, that kind of thing. So how do we unpick some of the limiting beliefs that might be holding us back? Being aware of the trickster when they're kicking in, the stories that we tell ourselves about why we're not following through on the actions that will take us closer to our goals. How do we unpick that and identify the root cause that might be,
stopping us?
That's making the trickster kick in the first place. It's not allowing us to follow through.
No, that is a really good point, especially the point about success and money, because that's usually attached to self-worth. So if you feel that you're not worthy of a certain level of life or status or quality, then it doesn't matter how much you earn. You're either going to hit a glass ceiling effect, or what you're going to do is anytime you earn above and at like that certain level, you're going to end up losing that money, or you're going to end up giving it away, or you're going to end up self-sabotaging it in some way. So that's really, really a good example that you gave there. So in terms of, to answer your question, I think the first thing is with anything, it's about self-awareness, isn't it? You can't change unless you actually know what it is that you have to change. So be very, very mindful and aware of the language that you're using, the words that you're using. What is the story that you tell yourself? And that story I refer to as a narrative, because we all have a narrative, and you hear, and when you start listening for it, you hear it all the time in people. Bad things always happen to me. Oh, typical. This is just typical. This is going to happen to me. This would only happen to me. Like, you hear people saying things like that all the time, right?
Or one I always hear, is, oh, I can't lose weight, I'm big boned, or it's just genetics, I can't do this. And you're like, where did that story come from?
Yeah.
You know,
somebody's told you that.
yeah.
And you're not born with it. There's
Yeah.
so many like around weight, or I can't be with a person, I'm not destined to be in a relationship, I can't see myself with somebody, or I'm not good with money, or money doesn't come to me easy, or life's really difficult, or all good things come to an end. Like these are stories that we're telling ourselves in different ways, and you hear it all the time, and people joke about it as well, you know, oh, that's just me, oh, funny me, and these kind of things are always going to, and you're just like, well, that's actually not funny, because if you take away the smiling face behind it, it's actually quite painful what you're saying to yourself, and it's actually quite hurtful what you're saying to yourself as well. So I think
because if you could imagine yourself saying that to a little child or a friend or a loved one, you'd be horrified saying that to another person, but you're like, well, actually you're saying it to yourself all the time, why are you doing that, you know?
And it's really hard, like even sometimes when you hear like parents making comments about the children, oh, she's the pretty one, or she's the clever one, or he's the you just like, oh my god, the damage, like stop saying that. It's just like you're just now implanting, like you're literally imprinting onto that child's brain, stop doing that, right? So this is where
you're setting out the blueprint for their whole belief system, and
that's it.
From 0 to 7 is the most important years, and you can literally just going, you are actually shaping and influencing them right now into what they are going to carry forward and take into adult life. And it's
like if you imagine that they're little baby trees, aren't they, that haven't fully, like, you know, and sometimes you see when trees have just been planted, they've got that guard around them to protect them, right? And they're so vulnerable because their roots are not grounded enough in earth. You think that's what children are like, they're not rooted yet. So they've still got time to grow their roots a little bit deeper, and what you feed them with or what you water them with at that point is crucial to their rooting. So if you're giving them things like, oh yeah, well, you're not the clever one and your brother's clever one, why can't you be a little bit more like your sister? Even comments like that, why can't you be a little bit more like your sister? Like that straight away for
and
that
we all
child.
do it innocently, you know. We might you sort of say it, because I've become aware of things, you know, I've got 2 step kids in my life now, and I say something perfectly innocently, and I'm like,
and you're like, take it back.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. I mean, you know, you're amazing, you're fantastic. But we do
but they say it.
We have to be really mindful about this and the influence that we're having, because this, you know, I love the analogy you're saying about the trees.
Because the thing is, when that guard comes off, if they're rooted strong enough, then it doesn't matter what the weather is like, they won't be swayed, right? But if they're already not rooted enough, or their roots are not strong enough, that's when people end up getting into toxic relationships, or they're influenced easily, or they're led astray, because that validation or that unconditional love that you were not able to give them, they then start seeking that in other relationships, you know. And this is where you get them repetitive cycles again and again. And a lot of the time, this is not a criticism for any parents, because it's hard raising children, and we don't know what we're saying a lot of the time, because we're just on autopilot. So there's things that you'll say
on autopilot, try to get the jackets and the shoes on, get them out
and try to keep them alive all the time. Don't touch this, don't do this, don't do that, you know. Don't go and step in the road. So I think sometimes in that moment you're just so focused on just keeping them alive and safe, right? So the actual like nitty-gritty of language and tone and wording and the impact it has, like I know for a fact my mum and dad were growing up, they did not have any time, because I see them now with their grandchildren. They're so present, Susie. They're so mindful, and they're so present. Whereas when we were all growing up, it was just like, come on, hurry up. Everything was such a rush all the time, right? Whereas now they're just so much more settled. And my mum admits it herself. She goes, that was a stressful time, because she goes, you're trying to manage jobs, and your focus is not on individually being careful about what wording you're using. It's just about raising children, and that's all it's about, you know. So I think the first thing
is what you need to do, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly, because it's hard work, and also sleep deprivation is a big thing as well, isn't it? So the thing is, your patience is not
parent until sleep deprivation kicks in, and then everything goes out the window.
Exactly. So I think at that point you're already running on quite a like low fuel, and so it doesn't actually help. So the first thing I would say is that as an adult, as a parent, whatever it is, whatever stage you're at in your life, start becoming aware of the dialogue and the narrative that's going on. And when you start listening, you'll start noticing there's a pattern. There's a pattern that keeps on happening, or there's a story or a sentence that you keep telling yourself. Identify what that is. And the second step would be to move away from just accepting it now, because what you've done is you've constantly told yourself that, and you're just implanting it more and more deeper into your subconscious. So instead of it just letting it sit there subconsciously, bring it to your conscious level by asking yourself, where does this come from? Why do I say this? Where is the evidence to prove that this is true? Where is the evidence to prove that this isn't true? Now, I'm not saying that's going to magically make you unshift like what belief system you had. But what it does is it starts making you think about it consciously rather than it operating as a program on a subconscious level all the time. So when you start to think about things consciously, then your brain, because it's analytical, it starts to look for evidence to support the belief that you have, right? So if you're asking yourself, where is the evidence to go against this? Your brain will start thinking, well, actually, I tell myself that, but that's not actually the case, because I actually do make quite a lot of money. I'm actually in quite a successful job. I'm actually really valued in my job. So why do I think I'm stupid, or why do I think I'm silly, or why do I think I'm not good enough?
Yeah,
whatever
or the imposter syndrome,
Yeah, so do you see so you might not notice that emotional shift straight away, but logically and rationally, then the brain starts to maybe challenge that root. So it's almost the equivalent of you unrooting now, right? So if you start chipping away at a root, do you see where now you're making the structure a little bit weaker, which means that the more you do that, the easier it will become for you as time goes on to be able to shift that and turn that around.
And even on the flip side of that, if you do think, okay, I've got this repeating thought, where does that come from? Where's the evidence? And if you say, well, remember that time I did this A, B, and C, and you do find the evidence to kind of back it up, then that's a training issue or a development issue, a personal development issue. So it's calling for you to say, okay, well, I'm not confident in this area, or I don't actually know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this tech thing, or, we were talking about that earlier, like technical, logical problems. And it's just like, okay, well, I just need to learn, and so therefore it gives you more information as well. It's not a tool to beat yourself up with, but it is developing your critical thinking to be a scientist in your own life and say, okay, well, what's working, what's not, what do I need to experiment with, how do I reevaluate, and what do I need to do, what's the outcome? So
and seek help and support if you need it at that point.
We're both huge advocates of getting support and coaching and counseling, therapy, whatever it is that you require. But I was having this conversation with my partner the other day, and I was like, we will go out and get a driving instructor, to help us learn to drive a car. If we want to get fit and healthy, we might hire a personal trainer, and we think nothing of it. If we want to improve our diet, we might get a nutritionist or a diet plan. But when it comes to developing ourselves and being a better parent, or improving our healthy habits, we think we've got to suss it all out on our own
ourselves. With all the self-help books surrounding us.
And you're just like, well, how am I trying to figure this out? I haven't got a clue. Why do we put that pressure on ourselves that we should know all the answer, or we shouldn't be so stupid, or we shouldn't do this? You're like, well, give yourself a break, relax and get some support, get another, it's not even another opinion, but perspective, that's the word I'm looking for, and a sounding board, so that somebody can reflect back the language and the repeating patterns of thoughts, the chatter that you're saying to yourself all the time. The thing I did want to pick up on in the three areas you spoke about when we're talking about foundations and environment, you said about look at your environment, what's actually going on, and the goals that you're trying to set yourself. It might not be realistic for what's physically going on in your life, especially when you've got challenges. And there's a saying, you cannot get well in the environment that made you sick in the first place. So it's really looking at your environment and going, okay, well, what is going on, and how is that stopping, preventing me, and limiting me from achieving what I can? So if somebody's in a situation, because obviously we set goals and we're like, we know where we want to go to, but realistically, there's 20, 30 other steps that we need to do before we achieve that. So how can we break it down? What's a process that we can do to break it down and say, okay, actually, that's where I want to end up. But where's the starting point, the real starting point that's going to give me the best chance to leading myself from A to B to where I want to go, and all the stepping stones in between.
Okay, so the question always is, the thing that causes the most pain point is what you deal with first, because that's needing your most attention. So just imagine like a physical body, right? Like there's loads of aches and pains going on in your body. That if you had a choice to what do you want to deal with first, you would always pick the most painful part, or the part of your body that's hurting the most, wouldn't you? And in the same way, emotionally, it's the same. The thing that causes you the most emotional distress or the most emotional discomfort, that's what you would deal with first, whether that's your health, whether that's relationships, whether that's work, whether that's people around you, whether that's your actual like living environment that you're in, or the family that you're in. That whatever is causing you the most pain point is what you would deal with first, because that because everything else might fall into place after that. So you don't deal with all the other little things, because that is not going to make an impact, because then you're going to keep coming back to that same space where your pain is the greatest, and then all the changes that you're making in the other areas are almost going to be counterproductive.
I mean, the other thing to consider as well, I mean, we touched on it briefly about sleep deprivation. I know that any healthy habits I've got in place, my self-care routines, they will all fall like a deck of cards if I'm sleep deprived and I'm not getting enough sleep. And, you know, like I like to get up early in the morning. I have my morning routine where, you know, I write my journal, I go out running in the morning, sometimes do a 7-minute workout.
Wow, accurate.
That's on the day that I don't do the running, I must point out. But it's, you know, I have that in the morning. But if I am tired, if I go to bed late, then I know that I'm not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And even if I force myself to get up at 6 in the morning, and yet I'll do my exercise and I feel great, but then by lunchtime, I am done for the day. It's almost like my work, I feel myself slowing down. I'm not as clear. I'm not as focused.
Not as productive.
And not as productive, absolutely. And you think to yourself, well, I've got this deadline to meet. I've got this report to write. I've got whatever it is. So then you start fueling yourself with coffee, with, you know, sweet, sugar, whatever it is. And of course, then the healthy eating goes out the window. So sometimes there's other pillars that we have to address. And it's really looking at the chain of events that have derailed you. So if you're thinking, okay, well, why am I not doing my exercise? You know, it might be just working out the best time of the day to do it. You know, it might be you're doing it at the end of the day after work, but actually, how's your energy levels for that? Is that the best time to do it? The reason why I do it in the morning is because I know that the rest of the day, demands will come my way. I've got work deadlines, family, you know, commitments that I need to meet. And I know that I become the bottom of the pile. And I've got, if somebody else needs me, then I'll do that instead of prioritize my own self-care, which probably comes down to a self-worth issue. And I think lots of people, or many people, might suffer this and not realizing they have a self-worth. Because I had this conversation with a friend, and he's very confident in himself, but he wants to lose weight, he wants to get fit, he's got numerous health conditions that would significantly improve if he reduced stress, he got more sleep, he ate better, and he exercised, that it would eradicate them all. And we had this conversation. I said, well, you know what you need to do, so why are you not doing it?
I can just imagine your face when you're having that conversation. Tell me why are you not doing it?
Why? You know, I mean, he's a good friend. I wouldn't be as brutal with most people, but, you know, we have a lot of banter and we're very honest and direct with each other. And I was just like, no, but seriously, why aren't you doing it? And he said, and then, you know, he was coming up with all these various reasons. And I was like, combating all the excuses and saying, well, a possible way around that would be this and would be that. I was saying it much more direct than I am now. But I said, is it fundamentally that you don't value yourself? And he was like, I do value myself. I value myself a lot. I've got a lot of self-worth. And, and he is a very, really confident guy. And I said, okay, are you valuing yourself when you feed yourself a ton of junk food? Are you valuing yourself when you stay up late and don't get an early night? Are you valuing yourself when you are stressing yourself out at work and you're working into the evening and, neglecting your family because you're prioritizing work over your family? I said, are you valuing yourself, and do you have self-worth when you're stuck at the computer, not going out for a walk at lunchtime, not getting fresh air, not getting nature, not moving, all the rest of it? And he was like, and I was like, but this is the reality. Like, I mean, I suppose that goes back to the stories and the tricks that
the deeper rooted values.
Why do we say we value ourselves but we're not? Because we do know what we need to do. So what's going on there?
Well, again, that's unrealistic expectations, isn't it? You're setting goals or you're doing things based on what you think you should be doing, which means that you're more likely to come off the track in the first place, right? So if you're, say, for example, let's just say healthy eating, if you're started a healthy eating plan, but it's not really what you want to do, or you're not really buying into it, right? Or you're not really invested in it, it's going to be harder for you to sell that concept to yourself. So you might do it initially, or you might do it for a few weeks, or you might do it into week 3, but then eventually you're going to go back to your default position because you've not dealt with the actual real reason of, why am I comfort eating? Why do I need to rely on that food? Why am I drinking alcohol? Why do I take drugs? And this is why it's really important to address the pain point, because eating, comfort eating, drinking, overcompensating, overworking, these are sometimes avoidance strategies as well. So what are you avoiding by doing all of that? Because if you're not dealing with the pain point, then what you'll do is all these healthy habits that you're doing, they'll last for a while, but then the pain is always going to override that habit, which is why you end up going back the way then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. And fundamentally, any change we make, the gain has to be a higher reward than what we're giving up. Because if you're saying, right, well, I'm going to give up this, if you're focused on what you're giving up rather than all the ripple effect of your healthy habits and what you're going to gain, and that isn't a big enough draw for you, then you're never going to
never going to change. And this is why when something traumatic happens in somebody's life, like say it's a life or death situation, or they've had an accident, or there's been a trauma, this is why people make those lasting changes then, or they come off and like they make big career moves, or they leave careers, or they leave relationships, because that is now rooted in a deeper reason, isn't it? Because when something like that happens, you think, where am I going? What am I doing? What am I here for? Like, where do I want to be in another 10 years? Can I see? So that's when you start asking the deeper questions. And that's why people end up making life-changing decisions. But if you're just doing, oh yeah, well, it's New Year, so I may as well set a goal because everybody else is setting it. It's so superficial. You don't even know. Like, I've actually worked, well, actually all of the first 2 weeks of January, this is what I was asking people. Everybody's on this high about goals and New Year's resolutions. And I was asking, so why do you want to do that? Well, I don't know. I just thought that's the next step now because I've already achieved where I want to be in my life. No, but what is that what you want, or is that what you think you should be doing? So there's a big difference there. A lot of the time, the goals or the intentions or the resolutions that we're setting is things that we think we should be doing, but it might not be what we want, and it might not be rooted in any kind of deeper value or deeper meaning or purpose in life, which is why we keep ping-ponging back and forth between the old habit and then the new habit.
Yeah. And it's funny, what you're saying about the pain point. Remember one of my coaches, I asked him this question because I've made loads of changes in my life, and I know there's been a switch where there's been a mindset switch. It's not easy to say, and it's just something's clicked into place and it's made the concept easier. Like my why has been strong, that it's like I can't even deviate from it anymore because it's just so black and white
clear.
to me. But when it comes to sugar and chocolate, like the stories I tell myself are, life's too short to live without chocolate. Why would you do that? Like, chocolate's lovely, you know, like so for example, like to put it in so I gave up drinking alcohol, so I haven't drank alcohol for 4 years now. I was not an alcoholic. It was something I could take or leave. It wasn't something that I drank for the taste. You know, I wouldn't sit in an evening having a glass of wine, but I would like to have a night. When I had a night out, I was like, woohoo! You know, I was totally up for the party. I was like, you know, first one there, let's get this going. I would be the last one standing. I would never wanted to go home because I was just like, well, fear of missing out. And then I set out Change Your World, and there was all kinds of things happened. But I also had to be driven in my business. I was setting up a conference. I was setting it up in my spare time because I was still working full time. And if I had a night out, it would derail me for at least a week, you know. So whereas, you know, if I went into work and I'd had a few drinks at the weekend and I'd be a bit groggy on a Monday morning, I still had deadlines. And because I was working for somebody else, I couldn't get away with, oh my God, I don't want to pick up the phone. I don't want to do this. You just had to get on with it.
You had to get on with it. Yeah.
But because I was working for myself, I was like, I would start procrastinating. I was faffing about. I was unloading the dishwasher. I was just like anything to avoid making the call I needed to make, because the fear had kicked in, because I would feel very anxious after a night out drinking. You know, like people talk about the fear that comes in, and they would talk about, it's usually like the hangover the next day. But I found it didn't just last the hangover day, it was the day after and the day after, and it would still be there, and it would like chip away at my confidence. So when I got a purpose and a meaning in my life that was way beyond and bigger than me, I had to get out of my own way, and I couldn't afford to, you know, have waste time completely. And that's what it actually felt like. That's what I mean about the mindset shift. And I decided, right, you know, this was sort of January, my conference was going to be in April, and I thought, do you know what, I'm not drinking until my conference is out of the way. So I had like 4 months, and I didn't even think about it because I had that purpose. That led on to me doing the 1 year no beer challenge, where you give up alcohol for a year, and that was it. That once I did that, we're 4 years down the line. But it was easy for me to make that change because I had something bigger. Now, when it comes to chocolate and sugar, I still have that narrative of going, oh, Jesus, you know, life's too short without chocolate. I want to give it up, but I don't really want to give it up, because when I visualize my life without ever eating chocolate again, I'm like,
it's so sad. It's so sad for you. It's too sad, so you don't want to give it up.
But also, you know, when you go for coffee and cake, it's a very sociable thing. There's all these things. And, you know, I'm like, already I don't drink, I'm vegan. So, you know, my mates would just be like, oh, seriously, Suze, another thing that you've given up.
Something, what are you going to eat? You're going to live on air?
I know. But I remember one of the coaches in my group, Dr. David Riley, I said, you know, why is it that I can't have that mindset shift with sugar? You know, why can't I get out of my own way? And he said exactly that. He says, you've just not suffered enough.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's so true.
It's not rooted enough, but there's not enough reason for you to give it up. So the desire for it is stronger.
Yeah, I've not had enough pain. I mean, this is something that's a legal substance. It's available everywhere. It's accepted. It's sociable. It tastes good. It's enjoyable. But you don't see the impact that it's having on you.
Yeah.
You know, immediately. You know, like with alcohol, you know, I would suffer the next day. So I felt it immediately. Sugar is just this slow drip feed, pleasurable thing.
You don't even realize it's there.
And that's it. And one of the other things, so everyone always says, oh, everything in moderation. And I, you know, very much used to agree with this until I heard Dr. Michael Greger speak. And he put it, and he told the story where he said, okay, imagine you walk into the living room and you chip your shin, hit your shin on the coffee table, puts a little gash in your shin. He says, give it a week. Your body does its amazing, wonderful thing, and it starts healing. He said, but imagine, the following week you hit the same spot, hit your shin again. He said, in moderation. He said, imagine you do that week after week after week, so you have the takeaway on a Saturday night, you have your chocolate bar on a Saturday night, you have the drink on a Saturday night, all in moderation. But it's the same spot getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And this is what I think is fascinating about our habits, because we are the results of our repeated actions, the repeated habits. And we think of moderation, oh, life's too short, we should do it in moderation. You're fine everything in moderation. You would never take heroin in moderation. You would never, well, maybe you would.
Take poison in moderation.
Exactly.
Just have a little bit of it. It's just a couple of drops.
I don't actually know who's listening to this, but you might. But you're like, okay, well, I wouldn't take cocaine or heroin, all these kind of substances in moderation. So why do I tell those stories about all the other stuff?
Because it makes you feel good. That's why.
I know, but well, heroin would make you feel good. I mean, I've never taken it. I'm not advocating it, but a lot, you get that high. And, the way people describe it, it's an amazing feeling. Yeah. And if you did it in moderation, but it's when it's almost like what the slow, it's like the daily habits, the less than empowering habits are the ones that are actually the slow killers. It's not the extremes that we do. It's those daily,
it's the daily rituals, isn't it?
And that's the stuff that's causing heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all the things that are putting pressure on our healthcare systems that we don't think about, because we're all living in moderation.
Yeah, but also it's normalized as well, Suzy. So coming back to that point you were making about, but so is heroin. But if you think about it, I think like if somebody was to say, oh, a heroin, you straight away, the first thing that comes into your mind is illegal, it's drugs, it's not good for you, and it's something that can potentially kill you, right? So these are like probably the top thoughts that are going to come to your head. You talk about sugar or you talk about chocolate, that's not the first thing that's going to come into your head. No. Why? Because it's normalized. You grow up around it. It's legal. It's not illegal, right? It's stuff that you've been used to comfort. Our parents maybe comforted you with, or you've been comforted in society by. You see adverts of it all the time, and it's like pure indulgent. And it's so. Do you see where it comes down to the messages that you receive about the habits that you're engaged in, right? So, if, for example, the
special
eating
occasions as well.
Yeah. Do you see what I mean? So, do you see where this is the difference, though? So, yes, all the other things can also give you those quick hits, right? But they're not normalized and they're not socially accepted, whereas eating food, comfort eating, binge eating, chocolates, night outs, takeaways, they're all treats and they're all normalized. So this is the messages now we're getting from society around us, which is why it's easier to do that.
And this is what we need to be aware of, our social conditioning and the influences that we have around about us. I mean, I know that we both advocate personal development, leading your own life, doing what's right for you. But when we've got this constant conditioning round about us, it's hard to step away, because you've got to be the person that's kind of been different from the crowd or the tribe, your family, you're saying, and it's almost like there's a judgment there going, I'm rejecting the way you live and the way I used to live, and I'm choosing a different path. And that can be very hard to do, because you feel isolated, and we're herd animals, and we like to be liked, and we like to be accepted, and we like to belong. So, that's another challenge as well.
Yeah, and food is such a social thing as well, Suzy. So for a lot of families, this is how they bond, right? In a lot of cultures, it's actually offensive to say no to certain foods as well. Like not just certain foods, but just any kind of food. So if you're as a family sitting down and the other person's like, I don't want to eat this, I want to eat something else, like a person actually takes offense to that. It's not just, okay, well, you can make whatever you want. It's like, oh my God, but you're rejecting my food. It's almost like food equals love, right? That's basically how it's interpreted. So do you see there's so many deeper connotations to it as well? And the thing with food is with anything else, right? You can literally remove yourself from the situation. So if you want to give up alcohol, just don't go to the pub, don't meet people, so don't socialize, right? If you don't want to take drugs, you just dissociate with that contact that you have that maybe takes you into that circle of life. You can't dissociate from food, right? You have to eat. So did you see? So when you're going through the supermarket to go to the vegan aisle, you probably will have to go through the chocolate aisle at the same time. Right? So do you see where it's harder because you can't isolate yourself from food if you think about it? So this is why it's harder to let go of those things. But I think in cases, but also remember, food is a very physiological reaction as well. So if you're sleep deprived, right, you will need that sugar hit. So it won't just be a craving. It's like your body is needing that to get through the day, right? If your iron levels are low, or if you're losing blood, right, then your magnesium levels are low, which is where you'll find that in chocolate, which is why you might have a craving for chocolate, because maybe it's that point in the month where your body's needing that extra magnesium. So do you see, our brain is really clever. It knows what food is going to provide you with what nutrient and mineral. So sometimes what you're craving, the body's actually craving the nutrient in it or the mineral in it. So it's about becoming clever with it, right? So that magnesium that you're getting from chocolate, you'll be able to get that from nuts and things as well, right? So sometimes it's the case of where I'm not going to deny myself the chocolate, but maybe I'll try and eat the nuts instead first and see if that takes that craving or gives me a bit of energy. And if it still doesn't, then I can see if I still want chocolate. So I think it's just,
or I can have chocolate covered nuts.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. I was actually thinking the dairy milk and nut in my head. I was thinking, I bet you she says that. So do you see what I mean? It's about trial and error. So you can't be that fixed with when it comes to food, because that's a really difficult thing. If you cut back, and this is why food diets never work, because people get so strict and so regimented with it. But the thing is, that's the one thing that's readily available. We socialize around it. We have to eat it. We can't isolate ourselves from it. We can't go out and say, you can't eat either because I'm not eating, right? Like, it just doesn't work like that. So you have to find a balance, and you have to find an approach which is flexible and sustainable in the long run.
And the other thing that I mean, the food producers know, and they put certain ingredients in the food to trigger the pleasure point in the brain, which is the same pleasure point that heroin and all these other substances, alcohol and all the rest of it, trigger to give you that hit and that high. So your supermarkets effectively are kind of a drug dealer, not the supermarket, but the food producers, because
the food producers,
they know they're trying to get you to spend more money. They want you to buy their food. So again, developing yourself, knowing your triggers, knowing your environment, your foundation, all these different areas are what will send you derailing off your healthy habits, so that you can limit them, and getting to know yourself and empower yourself, develop yourself. I'm conscious 20 past, so I know you've got a client to get to, but just could you give us some top tips about how to keep on track with your habits? What should we be doing if you do find yourself, you know, at this point in January, you've fallen off the wagon? What should you do? You know, how can you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is do not label things as good or bad days. That's the worst thing anybody can do. As soon as you start labeling things as a good day or a bad day, it becomes a competition with yourself, which is never going to be healthy, right? So don't be so regimented with what you're trying to do. So if you have an off day, not a bad day, an off day where you come off track and it's maybe not gone as well as you would like it to, just take it as what it is, which is an off day. It's not a sign of failure or low self-worth or that you're not good enough. Don't go into that spiral. Just take it as an off day, and then just the next day get back on track, and that is it, right? So no judgmental views, no judgment on yourself, no labeling days as good or bad, and none of the self-critical talk. Because if that was one of your friends and they'd said, called you up and said, oh my god, I just had chocolate tea and I was actually supposed to have a diet, you wouldn't be like, oh my god, you're such a loser, what's wrong with you? Like total and utter failure in life. You would never say that. You'd be like, do you know what, it's fine, it's not the end of the world, just start again tomorrow. But unfortunately, we don't extend that same kindness back to ourselves, right? So speak to yourself the way you would speak to other people if they were struggling or finding something difficult. That's what I would say, basically. And the final thing is, it can be as easy or as difficult as you want. It's all about the mindset. So if you start off with a certain message in your head already, which is, I'm never going to be able to do this. This is too hard, or I can't live without chocolate, or this is like the one thing that gives me happiness. If this is how you're starting off that journey, already do you see where your subconscious already decided there's no chance that's going to happen. I'll go through the motions, but I'm not really going to believe that I can change it. So it does all come down to mindset. And there's this thing that I said to a client last week, and it was something that came to my head there when you were talking there. It's like people say, I don't have the willpower to do this, right? I disagree with that. I think willpower is willpower. You can either will yourself to eat that chocolate, or you can will yourself not to eat that chocolate, right? So it's just about deciding, because that willpower is neutral. It's just about where do you want to direct that willpower? Where do you want to direct that energy? It's up to you. And it doesn't need to be all the time. Even if you just say like 80% of the time I'm going to try and be healthy, and then the other 20% is fine, right? And I know that's a moderation thing, but then what happens is that 80%, when you start to feel better or you start to feel good, see when you go back to that 20%, Suzy, you think, oh God, this is so sugary, or that's too sweet. Have you ever had that where you've given up sugar? And then you go back, or you stop drinking coffee, and then you drink coffee for the first time, and you think, oh my God, like, this is really strong. Do you see where you, so okay, yes, I know the moderation thing might not work, but it works at the start, because if you're doing that most of the time, then what you're doing is you're making your taste buds and your body more sensitive to sugar, more sensitive to bad foods or unhealthy foods, and you're making it more sensitive to things that are not aligned with what your body actually wants. So when you eventually take it in, your body starts to reject it. So for me, I don't eat chocolate. I do not like chocolate. And I can't even tell you the last time I actually had to put hot water in your face. Can't even tell you the last time I had chocolate. Right?
One of the things I was going to say there is like, get role models around you. Get somebody that has achieved the goal that you've done, that you want to achieve, and then follow what they do, model what they do. Get them as accountability partner, have them be your inspiration. So what did you do? How did you do it? So come off camera. We are having a conversation.
You call me anytime you want. I'll talk you out of it.
How did you give up chocolate?
You'll be like, imagine this conversation. I want to have a bar of chocolate. No, Suzy, what's actually going on for you right now? You'll be like, I don't care. I just want the chocolate.
Exactly. I'm not ready to give it up. But that, the 80-20 rule is so true. It really is. The more you can fill your life up with the good things, the things that empower you, make you feel good, make you feel loved, make you feel nourished, then the more likely you are to naturally squeeze the things out. So maybe actually, rather than focusing on giving up things, just keep filling your life up with all the good stuff, so that it naturally and organically squeezes that stuff out, and then you don't have to worry about making that conscious effort going, I'm not doing that again. So, and that's the thing. If I was filling my life up with holidays and free time and traveling,
you wouldn't have time to eat chocolate.
Oh, exactly. I wouldn't need it. It's on the plan though, and that is the thing about habits. We have to recognize that change does not happen overnight. It can do, but if you're trying to make a long sustainable change, then there's lots of sort of things that come into play with that, and it's just about doing the best that you can, realizing it takes time. Whatever disempowering habit that you are trying to change, you've had that probably a long time, and it's not just going to change like that, and you've got to go through a process to change that. So remembering that just the more empowering actions you can take, the more the positive ripple effect. It all comes down to sort of choices. So just keep at it. If you do have a down day, then press the reset button. Tomorrow's a new day, and start again. And even if you can only manage once a week to do exercise or work on your goals, whatever it might be, that is one day more than you were doing. So exactly. It's still momentum. So remember that, it doesn't have to be full on straight away. It can be just the tiny little baby steps, and that will create momentum in your life. But we could talk so much.
We can talk about this forever.
I know it's a huge complex subject, but if you do have comments or questions, add them to the comments and we'll get back to you on that. And we'll be back again next week. I don't know what we're talking about next week. We'll see what Radio Scotland has got for us lined up next week.
And we should open like a chocolate group for people that are addicted to chocolate. Maybe we can do that.
My name's Suzy Beaumont and I am a chocoholic.
And then I'll reward you with the chocolate and be like, yeah, well done. There you go. That's obviously not going to ever be successful.
Yeah, definitely. Not for my waistline either. Lovely to talk to you again,
You
Cam.
too.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.